Is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Just about. Okay.
Just about. Okay, I'll do my best.
You still have to speak up. Okay, so third speaker is Jade. Delighted to welcome her here, and she's going to tell us about things she's learned from Peter.
So I don't think we've ever really worked together, Peter and I. I was just nearby for a while. So instead of talking about work, I thought I would talk about a number of values I think I've learned from being around him. So I think the first time that Peter's influence had an effect on me was at Popol 2009 in Savannah. And paradoxically, I didn't meet Peter then. Rather, I saw a talk by Dino, and I had drinks with James and Cristiano. And both those things had an effect on me that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And at that conference, that was one of the first I ever attended. I was a PhD student, and I was quite unsure what to do with myself. And I remember rather vividly not getting anything about what anyone was saying. It was all very abstract for me. But I thought I'd make an effort anyway, and I went to the verification session, or whatever it was called, and there was a talk by Dino. And I didn't get anything he said either, but I remember being extremely impressed by the demo he had set up. And he said something like this. So, something to listen. And I thought to myself, and so of course by the end of the talk, the tool had found something very interesting to say about Linux. And I remember leaving thinking I wanted to be able to do that when I was a grown-up researcher. And it was very inspiring. So later, when I finally met Peter, he told me something that I then took as it taught me a first thing, which is that being ambitious is okay. And that's something I've taken from one of Peter's paper, Dare to Dream. It also motivated me to go and check out the paper, which I had no motivation to do beforehand. And this is another benefit of preparing dazzling demos, something that I've tried to do in my work to advertise the ideas. And although I didn't have much use for the content, I still don't, much to my surprise, I didn't feel too lost when I was reading it. And I remember being struck by the elegance of the writing. It felt concise and precise, but not terse nor cold. And it felt like the paper was on my side. So it gave me not only the motivation, but also a concrete template to try and expose the notion from my own work as simply as possible. And specifically, I have gone back to the first few pages of that Popol 2009 paper by Peter and the others many, many times when writing my own. Later, when I finally met Peter, he told me something that I took as a mantra in my own work, which is seeing is believing. And I took it to mean that for each theoretical advance, it was a good idea to have a supporting tool. A tool which you could use to first test out your ideas, but also to show to the world, so that you could demonstrate live that the ideas were effective and eventually perhaps deploy on a large scale. But how do you do this? How do you go about devising theoretical advances, building impressive tools, designing ambitious demos to demonstrate the effectiveness of your ideas when you're not much of a practitioner like me? So again, I turned to Peter for inspiration, and you build a team. And of course, your team might look out to outsiders, and your team might have to morph and evolve to go towards new challenges and be taken to different places. And here's something I've realized, although very much in retrospect, from my years nearby Peter and his team, it seems to me that they did diversity and inclusion before this was a thing. And from the first evening in Savannah with James and Cristiano, who just very simply took me on board and hung out all evening, to the Friday afternoons that were mentioned quite a few times at Queen Mary and UCL, I have seen Peter and his team be welcoming and engage with their visitors. And this appeared to me to be guided by ambition and scientific progress rather than any explicit policy. But it worked greatly from my point of view. This is probably one of the only groups of scientists where I felt welcome and supported. So speaking of support, I think it was Byron who told me this one Friday evening when I offered to pay for a round or something like this. And he said, no, you'll pay it forward when you have a job of your own. This really blew my mind, and I tried to do that with my own team. And of course, the support notion goes well beyond buying a round or even dinner. When I first started out as a lecturer in Victor's group, Peter, sorry, this one makes me laugh too. Peter really consistently and without question paid for much, if not all of my expenses on one of his grants when I first started out, and I had no grant of my own. And we didn't know this, but it turned out to be quite an expensive couple of years as I toured much of Europe and the US to demo my own work. And I'm certain that my work wouldn't have had the same impact if I'd not been lucky enough to benefit from Peter's generosity. So now speaking about impact, being around all of them, Peter, Byron, Dino, and the others, has taught me quite a bit about impact, but I didn't appreciate a few lessons immediately. It took me a while. And here's an example of something I hadn't understood. I remember writing some sort of application and asking Peter to review it. And I'd written something like, work mentioned in Linux Weekly News, this is an excerpt, demonstrates impact. And Peter came back with, not unkindly at all, he came back with, well, this demonstrates the potential for impact rather than impact. And it made me think very, very deeply about what I thought impact was and how my work compared to theirs. It was quite a big lesson in modesty. And one last word about impact. So as I said, I'm certain my work wouldn't have had the same impact if I'd not been able to move around quite that much and go and apply it in several different industrial places, notably. And I know that Peter encouraged me to do so in many different ways, by forking out money, but also by another principle he shared, which is don't be faithful to institutions and rather be faithful to the work. So there you go, that's me. Thank you, Peter, for everything. And that's it.
Excellent. Thanks, Jade.
What was the main thing you learned from the pub where we had the Lucky Chip burgers? Can you recall a nugget of what you learned from there? It's a hard question after all these years.
It is, yeah. So I think two things. The first one is it's okay that your team is odd. Because you guys, with respect, you were very odd. And
Thank you.
It was great. Not that I wasn't odd, I was too, but that's the thing actually, is that it was okay for me to be odd and for you to be odd and very inclusive. So, and that really made me think, maybe I can do that when I'm a grown-up. Maybe my team will look very different and very odd to outsiders, but maybe it's going to be successful all the same. And also the thing about adapting and evolving. So for example, I showed it was Hong Sok, Cristiano, Dino, and you, and then it became a subset of that plus B, and that the team can evolve to access other worlds, and perhaps it must evolve. Again, the adaptability towards impact is probably one of the things. Obviously, it's not something that you taught me directly at the pub, but from being around you guys. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jade, again.
Is there an adapter for Mac?